Good morning, good morning. Well, as I joke every time I get the opportunity to do this, I'm with kids most of the time. And so as Pastor Mike said, if I haven't gotten to meet you, don't take this the wrong way. It's because I'm stuck in the kids wing. And by stuck, I mean this. I get to interact with you if you have littles or you have kids or you are picking up your grandkids back in kids. And that's my community. That's my people. And it's been 19 years of full-time ministry in next generation ministries, whether it was, there was a short period of time where I was kind of overlapping doing kids ministry and youth ministry together just to meet a need at the church that we were serving at in an interim. But next gen ministry is so important, and I'm so excited for what Pastor Mike just revealed to you because my mentor, who was my kids pastor for a very short time, is our national kids director for the Assemblies of God over all kids ministry through the nation. And his big thing was, he who spends the most time wins. And that comes down to with our own kids. It comes down to ministry. He who spends the most time wins. And if our goal is to come alongside you and disciple, because we are not the main discipler, but as Pastor Mike says, we're here to supplement. And we're here to support you as you raise your kids. We have to spend time. And this gives us the ability to jump into relationships that maybe we don't get an opportunity to on a Sunday because people are intimidated to walk into Rochester Assembly for whatever reason. But this is just it's such an incredible opportunity that we have, expansion that we have to continue the momentum that we're seeing within RA Kids and RA Littles. And I'm so grateful that we have amazing people just like you who are serving our kids this morning because that frees me up. And I got to tell you, I kind of processed through the week. I was like, I'm going to worry about what's happening back there all morning long. My mind is just going to be racing 100 different directions. Is this happening? Their one day to give is our big penny war that's happening today. Is that happening smoothly? You know what? It really doesn't matter because I've got incredible people back there who know exactly what they're doing. And that's why I like to surround myself with those type of people so I can just focus right here this morning. My wife is back there. I'm hoping that she'll pop in at some point during the service so that she can hear me tell on myself or tell on her. And we can have that conversation at lunch today. But we've got incredible people serving your kids this morning. And so thank you for those of you that serve. Maybe you're serving third hour, you're here this hour, or maybe you have served in kids in the past. You have made a difference in the lives of kids here at Rochester Assembly. And we are so honored and looking forward to what is coming. And so with that, we've got some other things that are taking shape, Pastor Mike alluded to, and you're going to get to see that and hopefully be a part of that as we move forward and continue to grow. But this morning, I always joke with crowds of adults that you're not my crowd. This is not who I speak to on a regular basis. And I was like, it feels weird to bring the word without a costume change. It feels weird to bring the word without like a magic trick or some, flashy sleight of hand thing. But I was like, you know what? I can do something. And I ran into a couple people out and about this week. I ran into Catherine and Jessica at Target this week. And Jessica was like, I expect you to bring something big. Pastor Tyler was Pastor Tyler. I need Pastor Tim to be Pastor Tim. And so I brought with me this morning, Pastor Mike was so gracious to set it up for me again this service. I brought this ladder this morning. How many of you are visual learners? Anybody visual in the room? I also am a visual learner. I've learned different things throughout my life just by watching people. My church was a smaller, semi-traditional AG church where we still had Sunday night service every single week. We had youth group happening on Wednesdays and usually Bible study happening for adults. And so there was a time where our church was struggling with musicians. I took piano lessons when I was a kid. I learned how to play the saxophone in junior high, and through high school I was a part of marching band and all of those things. And then something started stirring about my sophomore year of high school. It was like, put the saxophone down and I want you to pick up a set of drumsticks. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I have rhythm because I can play an instrument, and I love music. I listen to music most in everything that I do, but I was like, drumsticks are not the thing, God, that I need to be picking up right now. I could just tell you that. It's going to be a disaster. And I started kind of leaning into that a little bit, even though I was a little hesitant. And my kids pastor's wife was helping lead worship for youth. And our youth drummer graduated and was going off to do an internship in another state where he was not going to be able to continue to be a part of the worship team. And I just sat down on a random Tuesday. I was working at the church part-time, helping with kids ministry, helping with youth ministry. And I just sat down while she was playing the piano and just picked up a set of drumsticks. And I'm a lefty, so I do everything backwards. Any lefties in the room? Where are my 10% of the population people? Yes. There's quite a few of you. And so I'm a lefty, so everything's backwards. So I look at that and go, there's no way. But I sat down at a right-handed drum kit, and I sat down and played open-handed on it, and it was the most awkward thing in the world. But my kids' pastor's wife looked at me, and she stopped playing the piano, just like abruptly stopped. She turned, and she said, "You play the drums?" I said, "No." She said, "You do now." And I said, I don't think so. She said, "You pack that whole drum set in your car, you take it home, you apologize to your parents on my behalf, and you learn how to play those drums. I don't care if it's even just a simple beat with just your hands. I don't care, but we need a drummer, and we need it now." And I was like, okay, you've lost your mind. I will give this a shot. But all along, I knew God was kind of working something. And for the next several years, I became the church drummer. Our drummer for our worship team had a government job. It moved him to Virginia, far, far, far away from where we were. And so I became the church drummer for a while. And I served, and it was weird because I was trying to learn how to do kids ministry. And now all of a sudden, I was just like taken away from that and put into worship. And God taught me so many things through that, and that skill would help me moving forward, and it was something that I couldn't see in the moment. So anyway, I brought this illustration this morning simply to say, no matter what platform or position you have, there's a mindset that we need to have, and there is a heart that we need to have in order to serve and be who God has called us to be. And we get to see that in Philippians chapter 2. Jesus sets the model for how we should do it, and Paul tells us what our mindset and what our heart condition should be in order to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and to serve people and to see people's lives transformed and changed. And so we're going to jump in to Philippians chapter 2. We'll go ahead and look at verses 1 through 4. They're going to be on the screen one at a time, but it says this: "Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate?" Verse 2. It says this: "Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose." Let's stop right there for just a second. Paul asked these questions in verse 1. I believe those are rhetorical questions. Paul knew that the believers being together would bring encouragement. He knew that there would be comfort in community, and he knew that there would be fellowship among them if, things were good, if relationships were not strained, and if people could do what he's going to mention in verse 3 and 4, where he kind of steps on our toes a little bit, and he gets a little bit personal with us. But Paul was calling the church to unity. And it wasn't unity for the sake of saying, I don't agree with that person, but I'm just going to agree so that we don't have any conflict between us and we can keep moving forward. No, it's okay. You know what? There are going to be things that we don't always agree on together. But if we can do things with one mind and one purpose when it comes to serving and when it comes to loving people well, then we are going to line up with God's will and God's way, and people's lives are going to be able to be transformed through the power of Jesus working in us as a church. Verse 3 is where Paul gets a little more personal with it. Verse 3 says this. He's very clear. Notice he didn't ask questions this time. He just made statements, very short, direct statements. That's how I function. How many of you guys like things to just be told to you the way that it needs to be told to you? And how many of you like to be able to process and think through those things? Everybody is different. I'm one of those people. Just say it to me. Just make it clear. Paul does. He says this: don't be selfish. All right? How many of us have been selfish before? I have been selfish many times in my life, and I fight being selfish because I am the baby of 3 children, and if you're the youngest, it's always you get what you want, right? I remember when I got my first car. I won't share with you what it is. You can ask me personally later. But my sisters got the exact same vehicle. My sisters are 2 years apart, and they are 8 and 10 years older than I am. So I am definitely the baby of the family. And they would tell you that I always got what I want. But I would tell you that all of the rules that applied to me were because of their mistakes 8 and 10 years ahead of time. And they like to introduce me to their friends sometimes that I haven't met as the afterthought because I was so much later. And then I have to remind them I was the only planned one of the three. And that is the truth. That is not me saying, that is the absolute truth. But they would tell you that I always got what I want. So fighting selfishness is something that it's a real part of my life. I have to be very careful with that. I also married the baby of the family. Jill is the third born as well. And so that creates some interesting conversations, some interesting things in a marriage when you have two youngest that are married. If you haven't discovered that yet because you've not been married very long, you'll figure it out, I promise. But Paul says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Verse 4. Don't look out only for your own interests. It goes right back to that selfishness again. I don't know why he felt like he had to say it twice, but he did. But take an interest in others too. And you know what? We could look at different translations where it's talking about don't just look to your own needs, look to the needs of other people. Paul is calling the church to serve well, to love others well, and to do it in unity through humility. Humble ourselves and not see ourselves as better than someone else just because of the position or platform that we have. You know, I think we live in a society that promotes self-promotion. Like we celebrate self-promotion. I'm going to share a fun little nerdy thing about me this morning. Any nerds in the room? Just own it. Any gamers in the room? I want to see hands. Don't leave me hanging. Gamer. More than the 8 o'clock service. But there are gamers in the room. I have core memories of playing video games with my dad when I was as young as 4 or 5 years old. We had this old IBM computer. And my dad did our taxes on it, is all I knew about it at the time. And then it was the big floppies. My dad got 2 from a friend who, my dad was a doctor for several years and like a long time, just recently retired, but had a friend who was a doctor as well. I think he gave him a couple games or something. I don't remember how we acquired them. But we had these games and we put them in and I was just like, this is the craziest thing in the world. We did our taxes. My dad did our taxes on this, which I didn't know anything about taxes. But then all of a sudden we're playing games and they looked terrible. How many of you guys remember those days, right? But there was this one game that I remember playing and it was these 2 gorillas and they stood on top of different buildings and you had to throw bananas. I see some of you motioning that you're throwing. So like, you know what I'm talking about. I'm glad I'm not the only one because there's some circles that I mention that and people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I am a bit of a gamer. If you come to our home and you step foot in our basement, you're like, where in the world am I? You feel like you are, my wife calls it the bro zone. Everybody has their gaming station set up downstairs. We've got LED light. I mean, you name it, we've got it. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that during COVID, everything became online. And we were trying to figure out how do we step into the world of these kids who are now fully digital, they're at home, they're isolated. How do we turn this into a ministry? And I was introduced to this not very popular game. It released about 7 years ago called Fortnite by one of our church's board members' kid. He was a troublemaker in our kids ministry, just didn't connect with a lot of kids. And I was like, man, I got to get into his world, figure out what makes him tick and see if we can't restore this relationship. Because man, every week we'd see each other. It was just like, you're here again. And I was like, I work here, so you're stuck, but you're here again. You know, like at some point your dad's going to rotate off the board and it's going to be great. But right now you're here, right? This was literally how I walked into that room every single week. And finally God was like, you know what? Why don't you just ask about different hobbies that this kid might have. And so I went and had a conversation with mom and dad. They knew that there were some problems and some tension, and they shared that what he liked to do was play video games. But they felt like he was isolated, didn't have a lot of friends that played with him. And so I was like, you know what? I will download this game and check it out. And I never looked back. I love that game. I play it with my kids all the time. But through that, we decided, let's make this a part of ministry. Let's reach out to these kids at our church. We were on staff in Dallas at the time, multi-campus church. We had 3 campuses worth of kids. And I was like, we're going to do something really fun. We're going to send out an email. We're going to ask parents to sign their kids up who play Fortnite and different video games based on the weeks. And I'm just going to play 2 hours with a whole bunch of kids from our ministry. And we're going to live stream it on our kids ministry YouTube channel. And you guys, it was transformational for our ministry during COVID. Post-COVID, our church grew so rapidly that my role transitioned, and that's what brought us here to Rochester ultimately. I became a manager of people. I was no longer pastoring kids and their families, and God was like, this is not where you're supposed to be. And we were like, things are good, God. Like, ministry's thriving, we're growing. But it just didn't feel right. It wasn't where we needed to be. And so God led us ultimately to start a search, which led me to a conversation with Pastor Mike through Chris Pruitt, our Minnesota Kids director, and God put everything together, and here we are, and I'm so grateful for it. But through all of that, I learned, you know what? Let's take this idea and take it from our YouTube channel. Let me put it on my personal channel on a different platform, and I think we could grow this thing and help people who are dealing with isolation. Because I remember our Master's Commission director, Jill and I went through a program called Masters. I'll talk about that in just a bit. But our director said, the enemy's goal in all of our lives is to isolate and separate so that he can eventually dominate. And COVID isolated every single person, right? We were obviously with our families, but community kind of got put on hold. We were so grateful. We lived in a neighborhood where all of our neighbors worked at home all the time, and so we still hung out together because nobody was going anywhere, and we knew that we were safe, and there were a bunch of boys to play with our three boys, and so like our community didn't stop, but there were people who did. And so I moved that same idea that we were using for ministry, I moved it over to my personal platform and have met some incredible people and have been able to, just through gaming, minister to people and serve people. And I knew that if I wasn't super careful, it would become about me and how many views I had. And so I don't keep my view counts on. I don't keep any of that because I don't want to feed what Paul was saying about selfishness. I wanted to make it about community. And so now I host multiple times a month community nights where I am just playing games with people from the community, getting to have real life conversations. But I've learned something very interesting in the process. And that is that we live in a culture that celebrates self-promotion. I knew that. I just didn't know how deep it went and to how many different generations of people it stems from. And so I have preteens, I have teens, I have young adults, I have senior adults who still game that will jump into our community games. And playing a game like Fortnite, it's a team game if you're playing together, right? Somebody should tell my middle son that, but it is a team game when you are playing together. Everybody has a different skill level, and that is one of the big things that we highlight with our community nights is it doesn't matter what your skill level is. It doesn't matter if you have a microphone and can talk to us. As long as you can hit the button to put a little mark on the map, we're all going to be okay, and we're going to have a good time together, and we're going to see if we can't win. We're going to see if we can't come out on top. But there are so many preteens, teens, adults alike that it's all about them. They want the most eliminations. They want to be to the objective first, even if it means they leave the team behind. And so many times I'm playing with all three of my boys. We have I call it my squad. We have our squad. And my boys like to troll, which for those of you that don't know what troll is, they like to meme and make jokes out of everything, and they will literally sacrifice the win in the game for a good laugh. It's what they'll do. And so I have nicknamed them the Troll Squad. That is how my community of people online who watch me play video games, which still blows my wife's mind that people sit and watch me play games instead of just playing themselves. I'm like, many of them do both at the same time. But my boys, we call them the Troll Squad because they do exactly that. And there are so many times that I will look at what's happening, realize we're losing, and that things are going to go downhill real quick. And I look at the little map up in the corner, and my middle son is halfway across the world that we're in. And I just have to go, where are you? And my wife goes, stop yelling. We can hear you upstairs. It's just a reality of where we are because we live in a society that celebrates self-promotion, and I use everything as a teachable moment because I am a kids pastor, and I tell my son all the time, it's about the team. It doesn't matter who gets the elimination. As long as the elimination goes to our team, we're still winning. And he just can't quite get that through his head just yet. But it's because there's so many people who are looking to climb the ladder of success and have a platform and a position where they see themselves as better than everyone else. And I see it every single time I host one of these community nights. And I always try to gently make it a teachable moment, even with these people that I don't know. I have never seen them face to face. I just know their voice. I know their online presence. And I know that some of them think, just as Pastor Tyler preached back in January, they think they're the GOAT. They think they're him. They think they're her. They think they're the very best at the game. And I got to tell you, some of them are pretty good, but nobody's the best, and some of them are the worst. But every platform and position that we have, we should use to bring glory to the Father. And we should use it to serve other people and not see ourselves as better. And so as Paul continues in this, we get to see the model of how Jesus flips the script. We think that we need to climb the ladder, but Jesus descended the ladder of success, the platforms, the positions. He surrendered those in order to serve, and Paul tells us how. And so we're going to look at today in Philippians, this will be the focus today. How did Jesus serve? How should we serve following this model that Jesus laid out for us so perfectly? And so we take a look at verse number 5, where Paul says, you must have the same attitude that Jesus had. He was saying, if you've been encouraged, if you have been comforted, if you have fellowship together, then I want you to agree wholeheartedly, and I want you to humble yourselves, stop being selfish, work together towards one purpose, and have one mind about the things of God's kingdom. And in order to do that, it's going to be hard, but if you will take on the attitude of Jesus, you're going to be able to do these things that I've told you that you should do and that God is asking you to do. And so then he doesn't stop right there. That would have been enough, right? Because we could talk about attitude all day long. That's another big conversation I have at my house on a regular basis, is about attitude, as many of you do. And the ones that laughed, you're probably just as guilty as I am about those conversations. But he tells us exactly how Jesus chose to serve and what attitude that we should have. And so let's look at verse 6 to find the first way that Jesus served. It says this, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Yes, Jesus gave up his rights. Even though he is in fact God, he chose to step down off that platform and to step into humanity. And he didn't see himself as equal with God, right? He didn't think of others as less than himself. Or he didn't think of himself as greater than others. Jesus stepped down from that platform and he gave up those rights. Even though he had all the power, all the privilege to kind of just rule as Lord, and he is and was at that time Lord, he didn't lord over people. He chose to serve them. He gave up that right, gave up that privilege, and he stepped down off that platform so that he could meet people right where they were. You know what? When it comes to serving, sometimes we got to meet people where they are. And I joked about this last service, and I thought about how real this is we meet people all the time. We have a little term that we use in our household, and it's come from another ministry that we served in. They're called EGRs, extra grace required. Anybody know somebody like that? That you, just like you go to have a conversation, you know that there is like a little bit more grace that you're going to have to muster just to make it through a conversation with that person. And so I think all of us at some point are an EGR as well. Because there are going to be certain things that I get into a conversation with that I'm passionate about, that the person I'm talking to is going to go, goodness, I wasn't prepared for this today. We all have those moments. But as we step into those, are we seeing ourselves as better than those people in that moment? Because maybe we're not taking as long to get to a resolution. We're not taking as long to get to the point. Are we seeing ourselves as better? Or are we saying, I'm going to sacrifice my right, my privilege in this moment to meet this person right where they are so that God can do a work in their life? I think we have to evaluate that. Jesus set that example for us. He literally did not let his deity make him feel like he was better than other people. He lowered himself. He stepped down from that platform. Verse number 7 tells us another way. It says this, instead, he gave up his divine privilege. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. By becoming less, Jesus was saying, now everybody else can become more. By becoming human and living his life perfectly and setting an example for us, he was helping us to grow. He was helping the people who he was teaching and doing miracles for. He was helping them to grow, and hopefully not just in that area where they had need, but in their relationship with God as a whole. Jesus lowered himself to becoming a literal servant, right? A slave, a servant, so that he could set that example and model and love people well. That's exactly what he did. He stepped down to love people. He didn't step over people. And then it says this, by taking on the form of a slave, this is from a commentary I read, the very nature of a servant, Christ came as a servant, not as the Lord, even though he was and is. He gave himself for others, even though all of creation should give to him. He was God living out a truly human life. Man, that's incredible. God of the universe chose to experience all the suffering and all the things that the junk that we walk through. And through all of that, he was still serving, even to his death, as we see in the next verse in just a moment. But as we think about serving people, what is it what rights do we have that we need to give up? I think it's a question we have to ask. How can I become less so that others can become more? What area of my life could I sacrifice in order for someone else to experience all that God has for them? You know what, sometimes that's a difficult ask, because verse 8 tells us what Jesus did next, and I think this might be the hardest one. It says this in verse 8, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Listen, Jesus was going to be obedient no matter what the cost. No matter what the cost. It led him to dying on the cross. I think that we can clearly see that Jesus was willing to do whatever it took in order for people to be served and for people to experience all that God had for them. He died a criminal's death. As I said before, my wife and I went through a program called Master's Commission. If you're not familiar with Master's Commission, it was an AG program. It originated within the AG. It kind of went independent at some point, but our experience was within an AG church. It's a 9-month intense discipleship program where those that feel called to a specific ministry, our Master's Commission was very heavy on a next-gen focus. There are some Master's Commissions that were heavy on a worship focus, heavy on biblical leadership. Like, there's different flares in different Master's Commission, and the Master's Commission that we went through was heavy next gen. More specifically youth ministry, because of the lady who was our director. She has been a long-time youth pastor, 6 decades plus, like almost 7 decades. She's closer to the 7 decades than the 6 when it comes to her time in youth ministry. And God has used her in amazing ways to do some incredible things. And Jill and I got the privilege, it's actually where we met, in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife is from Forest Lake, Minnesota. I am from Central Arkansas. God put us together in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a crazy story. I'll gladly share with you sometime personally if you want, because people are always like, how'd you meet? And so this intense discipleship program, 9 months at a time, 3-year program. Your first 2 years you apply, and they either accept or deny your application. And then the 3rd year, you literally write a letter of intent. And if they feel like that they want you to stick around for that 3rd year and that they're going to be able to help you launch into ministry, they invite you to stay. If not, they recommend other master commissions, other programs for you to jump in. Maybe they just feel like you need a little more maturity, things like that. There's lots of different circumstances that keep people from making it through that 3rd year. For me, my letter of intent was, I have no intent to be here a 3rd year. I feel like God is ready for me to step into full-time ministry. I feel like this is where God is calling me. And I didn't know that when I wrote that. I kind of wrote it jokingly because I had good relationship with our leadership there. But I was like, no, this is where I feel like God is calling me. It's time. I was ready to move away from Atlanta, ready to go back to my home state where I had connections and could possibly find a church that was looking for a young, inexperienced kids pastor, but ready to just, deal with all my chaos and energy and go for it. And so that's how I filled out my letter of intent. It was very short. It was like maybe 2 paragraphs. I walked into the interview, because they interview everybody, whether it's an exit interview or an interview for you to stick around for that 3rd year. And the room was just kind of, it was kind of different. It was an interesting exit interview. That's really what it was. But we get to our graduation ceremony, and the way that Master's Commission celebrates you is they don't just shake your hand and give you, your little certificate of completion. They have a finish line. There were flags, there's checkered tape on the floor, and we all got to step across the finish line and celebrate with one another all that God had done. Some people who had no plans to go into ministry, they just wanted radical transformation in their life, and they wanted it to be intentional and intense. And so we all stepped across, we're all celebrating different things, and I walk across the finish line through a door just like this one over here, and as I get ready to step through it, our director, who is, again, this lady who's been in youth ministry for a very long time, she's about this tall. She's not the tallest woman in the world, and she's she's passionate, but she's very non-assuming. She's approachable, but at the same time, there are occasions where outbursts during a message, you were kind of like, oh, that was out of character for her. She reaches over and grabs me by the shirt collar, physically by the collar of my button-up shirt. I'm wearing a tie, which is very unusual for me, and so I'm already uncomfortable. And she pulls me back, and she goes, meet me in my office in 10 minutes. And I was like, uh-oh. My letter of intent made it all the way to her office, and she's going to have something to say about that, and she's probably going to tell me I'm too immature to stick around for a third year anyway, so don't let the door hit you on the way out. And so I'm like, I don't know what to expect, and so I walk into her office literally 10 minutes after everybody's dismissed. My parents are waiting on me to go eat dinner and go back to their hotel before they leave the next day to go back home, and I have to pack all my stuff. And all of a sudden she goes, hey, I want you to seriously consider coming to be our kids pastor. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Literally just finished 2 years. I didn't even complete the program. I have not done full-time ministry. We were in an interim at that church for about 18 months, and we were supporting the associate pastor, several students, in leading the kids ministry. But I was like, are you serious? You want me to come be the kids pastor here? I was like, first of all, it'd be a huge honor. The second thing that went through my brain was a little bit selfish, and it was like, your name on my resume will look really good in the future. But at the same time, it was like, man, I'm going to be able to continue to soak up what God has already poured into me through these amazing people's leadership. And I was like, God, this is where I got to be. And so she was like, here's what we're going to do. I'm even going to pay you to take a 2-week vacation like you work here, and then come start here, and I'll still give you 2 weeks of vacation. And I was like, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And so I prayed about it. Jill and I had been dating for a year. Things were getting to the point where we were starting to talk about, hey, are we spending our future together? Are our destinies aligned? Are we both looking to do next-gen ministry? And how is that going to look? Are you here to support ministry? Are you trying to step into full-time ministry? And if you know my wife, just like Pastor Mike, she's a natural introvert. And it would have been so much easier for her to just say, you know what, I'm going to go back home to Minnesota. We'll date long distance. If it works out, we can continue this conversation about getting married in the future. But here's what she did. She said, I want to get a job here because I want to stay and I want to support you in ministry here. That's when I knew. I was like, oh yeah, no, this is pretty for real, and this most likely is what future is going to look like. And so it was like at that moment, all of this kind of flooded through my mind as I was preparing this message. Jill was like, you know what, it would have been a lot easier for me to come back to Minnesota, live with family, not have the stress of Atlanta, because Atlanta is stressful. If you've ever visited there or lived there, you know. And we knew that we wouldn't be there super long because we didn't want to raise a family there. But she gave up her right and privilege, chose to get a job as a live-in nanny, which was great for an introvert, right? She got to be with kids. She got to make an impact on the 2 boys that were twins that she cared for those couple years. But she stayed in Atlanta just to support in ministry. And it would have been a lot easier for her to just come home. It would have been a lot easier for me to go to a district where I was known, where I had connections, where I probably could have found a full-time ministry job within the first year of looking. And in the meantime, I could have worked for my dad at his clinic and been able to pay my car insurance, pay my car payment, all the things, right? But we decided, you know what, we're going to serve. And my salary was next to nothing. And then we were going through some tough times back early 2000s there in Atlanta. The economy was kind of rough and rocky, not nationwide necessarily, but in certain pockets, and we felt it. And there was a time where we took like a percentage of our pay. They cut us, and it was just like, this is tough, God, but we're here, and we're here to serve. And I'm so thankful for those years. But I look back and go, man, maybe, just maybe, God was saying, I see you on this ascension, this progression to this platform, and I need you to step down just a little bit. I need you to just dial it in. and I need you to serve. And that's what we did. It was tough. Like, I would go to buy groceries, and you want to talk about a budget. Man, I was down to like the nickel on my budget when it came to groceries. I didn't drive places that I didn't need to drive. I was very careful when I was driving on the road because I was like, I don't need car repairs right now. Like, I need to be able to stay under a roof. I need to be able to plan to get married. I need to be able to start putting away for this wedding ring. I need to plan all of these things to make sure that we can still be who God is calling us to be. But it was a little humbling at the time. And I'm so grateful that God put us in that place, because the next church that we went to, it was a God thing, as it has been every time we've transitioned. And so when we look at this model that Jesus gave us, he gave up his rights. He became less so others could become more. And he was obedient no matter what the cost. What does that look like in my life? What does that look like in my life? And what's on the other side of that? Because sometimes it just means sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. And it feels like we're never going to be able to climb that ladder, because, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with positions and platforms if they're used to glorify the Father, if they're used to serve others. But I think sometimes we're so quick to climb the ladder of success that we forget to look and make sure that we leaned it against the right building. And so we have to be very careful when it comes to all these things that Paul's laying out and stepping on our toes with. Am I being selfish in doing what I'm doing, or is this truly a sacrifice? And am I building a bridge so that Jesus can take a journey into someone's life and transform their lives? Now, I want to tell you, on the backside of serving, there is reward. And God lays it out right here. Paul lays it out in Scripture. And it's this, verses 9 through 11. Because Jesus was obedient, because he humbled himself, because he was willing to pay the price, all things we just talked about, he was going to be exalted. Therefore, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names. Verse 10, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow. Think about that. This is the guy who chose not to lord over people, but he was Lord. And now God is saying that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Verse 11, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Jesus was exalted because he chose to step down, not because he climbed a ladder of platform and position. When we humble ourselves and we step down into servanthood, God is able to do incredible things, not just through us and in the lives of other people, but we'll be exalted. And all of that helps us to point people to Jesus. And that should be our goal. You know what? I think there's sometimes we don't take certain serve opportunities at churches because they're not glamorous. My wife says it all the time. Kids ministry is not glamorous. It's boogers. It's cleaning up a bathroom. It's herding cats some weeks. You know what? Sometimes, I love you students, but student ministry is not glamorous. It can be, but sometimes it's not. Like, there's a lot of things that we deal with in different ministries and different ways that we serve people. We had an incredible serve day yesterday, and we met an incredible woman out at the park that we were at. Her name was Deborah. She was homeless. She kind of kept the pavilion there at the park. She kept it clean because she spent a lot of her time there. I was talking to her as some of the team was out picking up trash and clearing pathways. And it was just incredible to hear how respected she was by some of the other people who frequent the park that know her by name. She was there with her dogs and got to pray with her, got to just let her know who we were and what we were doing and why we were there, and we were just there to love the city. We had so many people comment on, like, thank you. They literally would just see our shirt. They're like, I'm reading your shirt. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. And you know what? It was because we chose to step out in unity through humility, because let me just be honest, my wife cleaned up some pretty sketchy trash at that pavilion yesterday. And you know what? She had a smile on her face the whole time, and I was like, I was like, that is so interesting to see, because that was a scary, hazardous, dangerous situation, and you just stepped into it with so much grace. You know what? That's what I want to do as well. And I think that's the challenge today. Let's not just look for this exaltation through climbing platforms and positions, but let's step down, just as Jesus did, and let God bring us the honor so that we can turn around and point people to him. I think that should be our goal. It's not out of selfish ambition. It's not out of vain conceit that we do it, but we step down so that people can experience what God has for them. Will you stand with me this morning? You know what? Paul asked all those questions. if you've been encouraged, if you've been comforted, if you've had fellowship together, right? He was laying out all these rhetorical things, saying, this is what you've experienced as the church. Now it's time to choose humility, serve boldly, and live like Jesus, who didn't just step down. He laid his life down for us. As I look around the room this morning, I see people who I know serve in various ministries here in the church. And I think about my team who's serving back in the kids' wings, serving your kids this morning, and I'm so grateful. And I know there's probably some people in the room, you've been thinking like, man, maybe I should join a serve team. Maybe I should be a part of a smaller community, because sometimes in a room this size, it feels like a big church. And as we grow, it's going to feel even more like a big church where you feel disconnected. And I don't think that we're fully living until we're serving. Like, God designed us for community, and when we get in, it's almost like a life group, but it's serving, and you're making an impact and making a difference in people's lives. And this is not a plug for you to go sign up to serve in Next Gen, although I wouldn't be too upset with you. But it's to get you to think this morning, what sacrifice do I feel like God maybe has already asked me to make that I've been unwilling because my heart or my attitude hasn't been like Jesus? I just want to pray this morning that God would help every single one of us, because we all fight it. I told you, I'm the baby. I got my first car, and my sister was like, man, your first car was so much better than ours. And I was like, yeah, but my rules are your fault. That's that relationship. And it's still that way today. Oh, I remember when you got this or you got this. Oh, yeah, well, I remember having to pay this price because you made this mistake when you were this age. But this morning, what is it that God's asking you to sacrifice? And are you willing to take on that same attitude and heart that Jesus had and serve so that people can cross that bridge and Jesus can do something radical in their life? I want to pray for you this morning. I want to pray for all of us this morning. God would help us to not be selfish, but to give up our rights, become less. Death in me is life in them. And are we willing to do whatever the cost? God, we thank you so much. God, we thank you for your word. God, we thank you that it's challenging. God, we thank you that it steps on our toes sometimes. And God, we just ask today that you would help us to evaluate our heart and our attitude. Is it the attitude that Jesus had when it came to serving others? Are we trying to climb a platform? Are we trying to climb into a position of success to lord over people? Or are we willing to step down and to serve so that you can take a journey into people's lives? God, would you use each of us this morning in a powerful way? God, through conversation, through relationship, through the platforms and positions that you've given us. God, help us to glorify you and help us to meet people right where they are, so that their lives can be transformed by your power working through us and not by anything that we can do on our own. God, we love you. We thank you. We thank you for the words that Paul spoke. And God, we are looking for you to bring us to that place of exaltation so that we can point people who see us impressed from a difference. God, you can imprint them up close. We love you and we thank you today. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.